old red high school building that has been torn down. Was it our first school in Hitchcock?
Yes, it was, honey. It was the first school in Hitchcock, and I went to school. I started school there. It was a 3-room school and an auditorium, and there was 6 grades, and each teacher taught 2 grades. We had 3 teachers, and then the later years they turned the auditorium into the 7th grade room, and the 7th grade students went to school in the auditorium.
Did you go to school there?
Yes, I did. I started school there.
I've heard people talk about riding the train to Galveston in the morning and returning at night. What was it called?
It was called a special that picked the people up in the morning and took them to Galveston, those that worked in Galveston, and then you had to stay all day. And I rode it many times when I was a child with my grandfather. I had to go with him. He was partially blind, and I rode with him once a week and came back. He did took care of his business in Galveston. And also the train, the students sometimes would sell pears. People that had pears in Hitchcock, they'd take them over the train. As the train stopped, they were allowed to go through the train and sell the pears.
Do you remember Hitchcock when Camp Wallace was an active base?
Yes, I do, honey. It was very active. Hitchcock was a live little town at that time because there were many, many soldiers, and later there were many sailors here in Hitchcock.
What kind of books were in the library?
Well, we didn't have too many books like we have today. You have beautiful libraries today in the schools' libraries. We had a few books. We had to go to Galveston, to the library down there, to take care of our researches and things. They didn't have too many books when I went to school, just school books, but not library books.
Could you tell us about the blimp base?
Yes, the blimp base. It was a beautiful sight out there to see those big blimps leave the hangars and fly all over Hitchcock and all over Galveston, over the Gulf of Mexico. They were on search for foreign ships in the waters, and it was a beautiful sight to see them.
Did you ever ride on them?
No, I didn't. They weren't allowed. It was just the military personnel that rode the blimps.
What did kids in Hitchcock do to have fun back then?
Well, they visited with each other. In later years, we had the community hall. We built the community hall so that we started the community hall in the old Brett packing house, and that way the children would come over, and we had a phonograph that we wound up, and they danced and just had refreshments for them, and they just had a good time.
What kind of games did y'all play?
Oh, they played checkers, and they played, they had cards, they played cards, things like that. Just children's games. It wasn't anything.
Did y'all have any kind of running activity games like hide and seek?
Yes, we sure did. We had played hide and seek and baseball out in the front yard, in the front of the house, and we had jump ropes, and we just had a good time like all children did at that time. They didn't have as many things and places to go and do as that you children have today.
We want to thank you for coming.
Well, you're welcome. I'm happy to be here with y'all. It's always a pleasure. Hitchcock was a nice little town, I'll tell you. Lots of vegetables were grown here in Hitchcock, and they were shipped by railroad. I guess some pastor shouldn't have said that, should I? But anyway, Hitchcock was just a small, there were about 300 or 400 people when I was a little girl, went to school here. It wasn't a city like it is today. Okay?
How were the banks back then, too?
Well, honey, we just had one bank, and it was many years before we really had a bank in Hitchcock. And they finally built a bank, and a few years later it burned to the ground, and then they built another one.
What kind of TV shows were there back then?
Darling, there was no TVs, there was no radios. It was all just phonograph. You had to wind it up and put your record, like your record player is today. It was just everything done by hand. No TVs, no radios, anything like that.
Was it hard?
No, we didn't know any better, and we had a good time. We visited with each other, children, and we had little birthday parties and baseball games across the street where I live. That was the baseball diamond for all the kids in the neighborhood. We had some good times.
How did the bank burn down?
They never did know, honey, how that happened. It was the bank below and the dance hall above, and they never did find out what caused the bank to burn. It was one of those things, I guess.
Did that kind of put Hitchcock in debt?
Well, there was one man that owned the bank, and I guess he felt it, but I'm sure he must have had insurance to partially cover it, so he wasn't completely in debt, I don't think.
Did y'all lose a lot of money?
No, the money's in the vaults. See, there's no way for the money to burn because it was in the big, heavy locked vaults. The vault didn't burn, so it was just the building. It was a wooden building, and it was just the building that burned.
From when we were born to when you were, what things have changed in Hitchcock?
Well, a lot has changed, honey. Lots of things have changed in Hitchcock. It's more progressive. We had all dirt roads. There weren't no fine highways and things like. And the highway today is not the highway when I was a little girl. You know where the flea market is in Hitchcock? The big old red brick building? Nevers. That is Genevers. That is where the highway went. It wasn't back over there where it is now. And it was just, it wasn't a paved road or anything. It was just kept up with a shell road. We'd go to Galveston and have to cross the wooden bridge. There was no fine causeway then. You went across the wooden bridge to get to Galveston, from Galveston.
Could you tell us about the railroad that went through Mr. and Miss Hitchcock's backyard?
Well, they owned the property where the railroad is today, and they gave the property where the old depot sat. Do you remember the depot when it was here in Hitchcock before they moved it? Well, Mr. and Miss Hitchcock gave that. She gave it in memory of her husband. The first depot was down by the Wright-Myers. It was just a little jumping off place. It wasn't much of a depot. Just a little shed that you sat until the train came, and then later years they put the nice depot here in Hitchcock.
What kind of houses were there? Modern or?
Well, darling, they were all wooden. There were no brick homes in Hitchcock. And, of course, back in those days, there was no electricity and no bathrooms. You had to go to the little house in the back. And you had oil lamps. You had to study and with your oil lamps. There wasn't any electricity. And there were very few telephones, maybe 3 or 4 telephones in the whole town.
Was it safer back then to go outside in the dark?
Yes, I believe it was, honey. Because